What's going on, Summoners? I'm Kangas, and welcome back to another ProGuides patch rundown. Today, I'm running you through all of patch 11.4's changes and also providing you with a tier list for every single role. This is looking like a huge patch for junglers specifically, and since they literally affect every other lane in the game, it's a big one. So hit that sub button, and let's hop right into it. So unfortunately, we gotta start with some sad news. No new skins. I know it's a downer for some, but with the bad news out of the way first, we can start talking about some of the bigger changes this patch. We'll start with systems and talking about the jungle specifically. For the past few patches, the role has been a little too powerful, and it's up for some nerfs this patch. Braum's base experience has been reduced from 135 to 182.25 down to 125 to 168.75. The gold payout was also lowered by 20, and the base health of the camp increased by 100. Large Krug's base XP has gone down from 37 to 49.95 down to 27 to 36.45, and the gold also lowered by 10. Small Krug's base experience has also been reduced from 18 to 24.3 to 16 to 21.6. Finally, Razorbeak's base experience has been lowered from 45 to 60.75 down to 35 to 47.25. The gold was reduced by 10 as well. Overall, this means that the payout for clearing the jungle is lower than before, but the biggest nerf is to Gromp. Not only is the reward lower, but it's also slightly tankier. This won't have a giant impact on clear speeds, but it'll up the risk of clearing the camp. Since the Gromp is the camp that restores health and mana, it's an essential part of everyone's jungle clear. A little bit healthier, and there's more time for aggressive junglers to walk in and steal their opponents away. With that covered, let's start talking about the item nerfs this patch. First up, we got one to Moonstone Renewer. To finish up those Moonstaff nerfs, Moonstone has also been hit this patch. Its base heal has been reduced from 70 to 100 to 50 to 100 based on level. It's equally as effective as before in the late game, but there's a lot less value now early on. Previously, this item was too worthwhile for how little gold it cost. Hitting its early game power should lower its effectiveness, and hopefully champions who weren't designed to build it will now return to their previous builds. Now let's take a look at item buffs. Everfrost got a few buffs this patch. First, the cast time was reduced from 0.25 seconds to 0.15 seconds. Also, the build path has also been changed to include a Kindle gem. While the total cost remains the same, you have a couple more small purchases that you can make along the journey. The health was increased from 200 to 250, and finally, the active damage was also buffed from 100 plus 30% AP to 125 plus 35 AP. Everfrost is looking so much stronger this patch, and I highly suggest that all of you AP carry players give it a try. Speaking of which, time for our question of the day. What's your favorite item activatable in League of Legends? Yeah, I know everyone says Everfrost activatable looks super pretty, but I'm a support man who can't hit a skill shot to save my life, so I prefer Locket. Nothing like giving the enemy assassin the bird as they try and dive your backline, right? But anyway, let me know yours in the comments down below. Next up for item buffs, Cosmic Drive is also on the list. These are some much needed buffs because the item has been a peculiar one with factors limiting its usability. First up, the big one, its movement speed bonus on spell hits has just straight up been removed. The passive has instead been replaced with one much simpler. If you have at least 160 AP, you gain 20 ability haste and 10 to 30 movement speed. However, the base ability haste was lowered from 30 to 20. This means that you'll still gain 40 ability haste from a single item, which is massive. Like Rabadon's Death Cap, Cosmic Drive is now a great aggressive purchase for players who show no fear. Now that the movement speed will be a flat bonus rather than requiring you to hit opponents, the item will without a doubt feel stronger. Guinsoo's Rageblade was also buffed this patch, as the attack speed was increased from 40 to 45%. There's not much to talk about with this change, as it's pretty minor. However, we do have several buffs for Grievous Wounds items. First is Chempunk Chainsword, which has had its health increased from 200 to 250. Mortal Reminder is next with its AD buff from 20 to 25. And finally, Morellonomicon had its AP increased from 70 to 80. The reason these items needed buffs was that Executioner's Calling and Oblivion Orb were so much cheaper. So much so that there's just too little incentive to upgrade them. Not only were they costly, but purchasing them would set you behind finishing other items, and with these buffs, it should be a slightly better choice than before to actually finish that upgrade. With that covered, let's hop into champion changes next. Starting off with the top lane, Renekton has received a small nerf this patch. Apparently, Renekton has been too strong in pro play for Riot's taste, and a good blind pick for sure. I personally feel like there have been better ones. Camille's been rising in popularity, and Gnar is also doing exceptionally well. But you know what? Better nerf the Croc instead. His Q healing for minions has been reduced from 3 to 9 to 3 to 7, and the empowered healing down from 9 to 27 to 9 to 21. Alongside recent nerfs to Gore Drinker, Renekton is now going to have way less sustain as opposed to a couple of patches ago. For now, we'll keep him in the A tier, but I think he's going to drop further. If you're gun-ho on still sticking with Renekton, you better go check out ProGuides.com and talk to one of our coaches, get some lessons so that you really know how to play the champ. We're actually running a promotion right now, so if you use the code RANKUP2021, you'll receive a 20% discount on a subscription. Make sure to check it out, but now let's get back into the changes. I mentioned her before, and high elo players can breathe a sigh of relief as Camille has finally also been nerfed this patch. 11.4 is probably not going down in history because of it, but I'm sure plenty of players are still happy. Her W's cooldown has been increased from 15 to 9 to 17 to 11 seconds. While it's not the biggest nerf, it's definitely going to take a hit on Camille's versatility and ability to win certain matchups. The longer cooldown means she has less poke to work with, and close matchups could potentially swing against her this patch as counterpicks are going to have way more to work with. We'll leave Camille in the S tier for now, but we expect her win rate in high elo especially to drop a bit. And the next change is to Fiora. Her passive damage has been increased from 2.5% plus 4.5% per 100 AD to 3% plus 5.5% per 100 AD. She's been underperforming recently, and with this buff, she'll be even harder to 1v1 later in the game. Fiora is designed to be a split-pushing monster, and with her passive buffed, she'll have an even easier time cutting through both juggernauts and tanks in a side lane. We've moved Fiora up to the A tier as a result. Tryndamere's also gotten a buff as his base AD was increased from 69, nice, to 72. Having that much AD means that he has the highest base AD in the game now. Those random crits are going to sting a lot harder in the early game, and with some more base AD, Tryndamere will be an aggressive early game pick that you don't want to mess with. This slightly affects his wave clear and also makes last hitting that much easier. I'm not a top lane main, but when I get autofilled and have to play Tryndamere, I'm fuming thinking about all the first bloods that he'll get off of lucky crits. We're also moving Tryndamere up to the A tier as a result of this buff. Urgot has also gotten a buff this time around. The on-hit damage effectiveness on his W was increased from 50% to 75%. This is a pretty nice change, but it really doesn't help Urgot enough to move him up the list. And the final top lane changes are that we've moved Yone and Shen into the A tier. Yone is popping off as a mid laner, and his top lane performance is slowly following. Even if the results aren't as good, the fact that he's one of the strongest mid laners in the game makes him a great flex pick up top. Shen is still a solid pick, but he's not holding up compared to the other top tier champions. This can be attributed to the way that the past few patches have played out, as a lot of champions have been buffed and tank items were changed to make Sunfire Cape weaker. Shen doesn't really need Turbo Chem Tank or Frostfire Gauntlet, so he doesn't feel as good now. So our OP picks for the patch are Darius and Garen, followed up by Pantheon, Malphite, Aatrox, Wukong, Camille, Maokai, Poppy, Cho'Gath, Gnar, Riven, and Mordekaiser in the S tier. With that covered, let's talk about the big one this patch, Jungle. In spite of his low pick rate, Skarner is actually getting close to the OP tier. He's received a small nerf this patch, but we still think he'll remain in the S tier for now. His base HP has been lowered from 601 to 580, and his health per level from 90 to 85. Skarner is a bit squishier now, but that won't stop him from pressing R and making game-winning picks. He'll be doing more or less the same that he has been. Amumu has also been buffed this patch. Like we predicted, he's received a revert on his previous E-nerf. The base damage has been increased from 75 to 155 to 75 to 175. Amumu has also gotten a small buff to his base HP, putting him at 615 health. He's received a harsh set of nerfs this season after the item reworks because they made him a bit too strong, and this buff should help mitigate the jungle nerfs this patch. We'll still leave him in the A tier, but we think there's room for even more buffs in the future. Another buff on the list is for Lee Sin. His Q's cooldown has been reduced from 11 to 7 seconds down to 10 to 6 seconds. This is a well-needed buff as ability haste is weaker than cooldown reduction of old. The lowered cooldown should increase Lee Sin's damage, make him more mobile, and open up a couple of doors to outplay this patch. We'll keep monitoring this, but for now, Lee Sin will stay in the A tier. With these balance changes being so small, our tier list remains relatively the same from our mid-patch update. There were huge systematic changes to the role, however, and our analysts will make sure to keep their eyes out and see how the meta changes. Overall, the jungle nerf is a nerf to all junglers, whether they want to power farm or go for ganks. That said, one notable pick that I want to mention is Rammus. If you're gold or below, you should definitely add him to the list of OP picks that we'll mention in a second. His overall win rate at the end of last patch was 54%. From iron to gold, Rammus has been steamrolling the competition and serves as a great counter pick to the squishy glass cannons who can get singled out by Rammus's taunt. Meanwhile, Karthus has been on our radar for high elo, but it's tough to say if he'll continue dominating like he did towards the end of last patch. With jungle gold and experience nerfed this patch, champions who clear the jungle exceptionally fast probably won't be as strong as before. Again, we'll have to wait and see, but expect him to drop down. So our OP picks for the jungle are Hecarim, Udyr, and Viego, followed up by Kha'Zix, Graves, Evelynn, Rammus, Echo, Kayn, Nunu, Ivern, Fiddlesticks, Karthus, Elise, and Skarner in the S tier. Most notably, Udyr is doing incredibly well right now, and he ended the last patch with a 53% win rate in Platinum and higher. But enough of junglers, let's move on to the mid lane. Talon got a very nice buff this patch. His W's cooldown has been decreased from 9 to 9 to 7 seconds, and the outgoing bonus AD ratio was increased from 0.4 to 0.55. Buffing his W specifically is really scary. Talon's wave clear will be slightly stronger than before, but more importantly, the reduced cooldown on his W is going to make his mid and late game much stronger than he was before. He'll be able to consistently cast it multiple times during fights, and of course, the ratio buff is going to make it a little easier to burst down enemies as well. With this change, Talon is now on the border of pushing into the S tier. We'll continue keeping an eye on him, but one reason I think he'll be stronger is the junglers are going to be a bit weaker. I can potentially see a throwback to mid laners catching out junglers and one-shotting them for free gold. But assassins aren't the only mid laners getting buffed, we got Veigar receiving one as well. His Q's mana cost was lowered from 40 to 60 to 30 to 60, and his R's cooldown decreased from 120 to 80 seconds to 120 to 60 seconds. With his Q more spammable, Veigar's scaling has been vastly accelerated. Hitting that 1000 AP late game fantasy is so much more realizable this patch. With a shorter cooldown on his ultimate, it might become an ability that you cast off cooldown to take a big chunk of health off an enemy, whether or not you get the kill. 60 seconds lowered further by ability haste is a very short cooldown that players can easily take advantage of. As a result, we moved Veigar up to the B tier. To everyone's surprise, Katarina also got a buff. Her ultimate's on-hit damage modifier increased from 25% to a scaling 25 to 30%. The physical damage on each dagger also got buffed, increasing from 15% bonus AD to 16% bonus AD. Each dagger's damage also increases by an extra 3% for every 100% of your total attack speed. While this buff sneaks in some extra damage, we don't really know if it's enough to move Katarina to the S tier for now, so she's staying put. The final change we've made is that we've moved Diana into the S tier. She has a lot of good matchups against popular picks, and we've been undervaluing her so far. Her burst damage and ability to gap close make her a very threatening opponent when you're unable to escape. Even against AD assassins, she's been doing pretty well, as she's able to buy an early Seeker's Arm Guard for extra MR stacking. If you missed it, we made some huge changes to our tier list during the mid-patch update. In our OP tier, we now have Yone, Yasuo, and Anivia. The former two are popping off as a result of the small buffs to Immortal Shield Bow. Following them are Pantheon, Zed, Victor, Annie, Katarina, Galio, Malphite, Fizz, Echo, Seraphine, Kiana, Viego, and Diana in the S tier. It might sound silly, but watch out for Annie, especially this patch. With the buffs to Cosmic Drives, our analysts think she'll be an even better pick. Seraphine will retain her S tier placement in spite of nerfs to Moonstone Renewer because we think her incredible scaling will still justify her as a pick. Now let's talk about the lane everybody likes to complain about, bot lane. We got a lot of changes to go over here, so let's hop into it. Samira's nerfs have been anticipated for quite some time. Some might say she's been gutted this patch, but we still think she'll be playable. First, Samira will no longer be able to dash to allies with her E. Also, the dash speed on the ability has been reduced from 2050 to 1600. Her W's duration was lowered from 1 second to 0.75 seconds, and her Q's total AD ratio has been changed from 100 to 80 to 110%. All while her passive's melee damage bonus ratio was adjusted from 7.5 to 3.5 to 9.5 total AD. Finally, her ultimate's cooldown has been increased from 3 to 8 seconds. With numerous changes, counterplay to Samira should be better defined, and we've moved her down to the A tier. I think the biggest nerf here is to her W, as you'll need to be way more precise with your timing now. And speaking of AD carries that came out in 2018 or later, Kaiso was also nerfed this patch. Her Q base damage per missile was lowered from 45 to 110 to 40 to 100, meaning that the max single target damage has gone down from 101.25 to 247.5, down to the now much easier to understand 90 to 225. The evolved maximum has thus been reduced from 168 to 412.5 to 150 to 375. Kaiso has been a superstar bot laner because she's been just good at everything. Dealing too much damage while being so safe, she was the last patch's most contested bot lane pick, but it looks like she'll remain very strong in spite of this nerf. We'll still leave Kaiso in the OP tier, but at worst, we think she could drop to S tier. For now, our analysts don't think the nerfs will be enough to completely bring her down. Somebody who has been down for quite a while though, Caitlyn did receive a buff this patch. Her AD per level has gone up from 3.3 to 3.8, and her attack speed per level up from 3.5 to 4%. She's received similar buffs in the past, and while they seem small, her win rate went up a surprising amount. With another buff to her scaling, Caitlyn is actually looking pretty scary. We'll leave her in the A tier for now, but she'll be noticeably stronger, especially because of the buff to her attack speed per level. Next up is Jinx. 11.3's changes were supposed to buff her, but her win rate actually stayed around the same. Since the intended results weren't achieved, this patch, her base health was increased from 550 to 610. Essentially, it's a revert on a nerf she got in anticipation of her becoming too strong. This is a huge buff, and we've moved Jinx into the A tier as a result. Varus has been in desperate need of a buff, and he got another one this patch. His W's active bonus damage has gone up from 0 to 50 to 0 to 80% on a charged Q. As a result, the maximum value was increased from 9 to 21% to 10.8 to 25.2% of his target's missing HP. But considering W has such a long cooldown, we think Varus will remain a B tier pick even after this change. So our OP picks for the bot lane are still Jhin, Kaiso, and Seraphine, followed up by Ashe, Vayne, Ezreal, Senna, and Miss Fortune in the S tier. Finally, let's conclude with supports. It's about damn time, Braum has been buffed this patch. His ultimate's cooldown was reduced from the original 140 to 100 down to 120 to 80 seconds. Again, with ability haste being weaker, Braum's ultimate cooldown has just been way too long. By the late game, you want to have your ultimate up for every single team fight. With longer death timers, this is realistic for most champions, but it just hasn't been for Braum with his sluggish 100-second cooldown at max rank. Lowering the cooldown by 20 seconds is massive. Even early game, it'll help him fend off dives and contribute more to teamfights. In the late game, this buff simply means that he should be able to cast his ultimate every teamfight. We'll still leave him in the B tier, but it's definitely a nice buff. Soraka has also been buffed this patch. Since Moonstone Renewer was nerfed, Soraka, who's been underperforming, is going to need some help as well. Her Q's bonus movement speed was buffed from 15 to 25 to 20 to 30%, and her W's base heal up from 90 to 230 to 100 to 240. This buff to her W should balance out the nerfs in Moonstone and of course make her late game slightly stronger than before. Extra movement speed on her Q is also huge as it'll make her a safer pick who can more easily kite opponents. It looks like these buffs will do a little more than offset the Moonstone nerfs, and we've moved Soraka up to the B tier as a result. Now for other changes, we've moved Maokai down into the A tier. He was sort of a gimmick pick, and while I loved abusing him with the Imperial Mandate, due to the nerfs on the item, he's been gradually falling off. While he's still doing pretty well, he's not nearly as popular as before and doesn't really command the same respect as the other S tier picks. One other change we've made from the list is that we've dropped Lulu from the OP to S tier. The nerfs to Moonstone are especially going to hurt her. Lulu is a great support who shields allies and provides utility to keep them out of harm's way, and Moonstone Renewer is a way for her to access healing. Without it, she doesn't have a consistent way to heal her allies. Since it's been nerfed in the early game, we think Lulu will feel noticeably weaker. As a result, our OP picks for this patch are Leona, Thresh, and Seraphine, followed by Lulu, Bard, Morgana, Nami, Janna, Alistar, Brand, Nautilus, and Rel in the S tier. Well, people complain so much about junglers being too OP that now we got their clear speed lengthened and XP lowered. Congrats people, you ruined my favorite jungle meta ever for pro play. Anyway, that'll conclude our 11.4 patch rundown. Thanks so much for watching. Let us know in the comments below if you think jungle will be more or less impactful now. Also, check out the description for a link to join our Discord, like the video, sub to the channel, but most importantly, best of luck on the Rift. Stay hydrated, and I'll see you in the next one. I need a hero.